I found out what my mother said about me from a nurse I had never met. I was standing in the hallway of Mercy General on a Wednesday evening in November, still in my work clothes, having driven 40 minutes after a full shift because my mother's neighbor had called to say Patricia had been admitted for chest pains and nobody else had come. The nurse, a woman maybe 10 years older than me, name tag that said Rosa, stopped me before I got to the room. She said, carefully, "You should know that when you were listed as emergency contact, and we called, your mother told us not to call you again." I stood there. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Rosa said she had found the words unusual enough to write down in the intake notes, word for word, because she had been a nurse for 18 years, and in 18 years she had learned to document things that felt wrong. She said, "Your mother told us, and I'm going to say this exactly, don't call her. She's nobody to me." I want you to hold that sentence. Don't call her. She's nobody to me. Said to a stranger in a hospital about the person whose name was on her electricity account, her medical credit card, her pharmacy charge line, her emergency room balance from 2019, and 2 other accounts I didn't know about yet. I know all that now. That night, standing in that hallway, I only knew about some of it. What none of them knew, not my mother, not my brother Marcus who had driven in from Columbus when he finally got around to it, not the billing department that had been sending notices to my address for 14 years, was what I had been quietly building while I paid those bills. The yellow legal pad on my kitchen table. Every number, every date, every account. I had been keeping records the way you keep records when you know, somewhere deep and tired, that one day the keeping is going to matter. I was right about that. Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories about ordinary people who find out, finally, that the truth they've been carrying has teeth. If you have ever paid for something you didn't sign up for and smiled through it because the alternative felt worse, this one is for you. Stay with me because the part where the numbers speak for themselves is coming. It doesn't arrive the way you'd expect. It arrives on a Tuesday in an attorney's office, with a credit report and a legal pad and a woman named Ellen who saw what I couldn't say out loud for 14 years. Subscribe, leave a comment, and let's go back to where this started. My name is Diane Calloway, and I grew up in Crestwood, Ohio, in a house where the money situation was always somewhere between precarious and fine, depending on which version of the story you were being told, and who was in the room. Patricia, my mother, was a woman who had mastered the gap between those two things. She could describe financial struggle in a way that made people want to help her, and describe prosperity in a way that made people want to admire her, and the skill was in knowing which performance the moment required. I watched her work that gap for as long as I could remember. She was good at it. I want to say that clearly, not to make her sympathetic. You'll decide for yourself how to hold her, but because understanding how good she was at it is the only way to understand how long it took me to see what was happening. I am 33 years old. I have worked in accounts receivable at a dental group in Crestwood for 9 years. I understand billing structures. I understand insurance coordination and outstanding balance management, and the difference between a charge-off and a settlement. I understand these things at a granular level, and I have for a decade, and I am telling you that it still took me until I was 31 to understand the full shape of what my mother had been doing. That is not stupidity. That is love doing what love does, which is make you slow to see the thing that hurts. My brother Marcus is 4 years older than me. He has my mother's coloring and my father's easy temperament, and a way of moving through the world that suggests it will take care of him, and largely it has. He works in sales. He calls on holidays and sometimes on birthdays. He sent flowers when our grandmother died, and when I had my appendix out, and he is not a bad person. He is simply a person who was never asked to do the things I was asked to do, and who therefore never had to decide whether to say yes. That asymmetry started early. Our father, Gerald, left when I was 11 and Marcus was 15. He left in the particular way of men who want the credit for leaving honestly. He told us directly. He paid what the court required. He showed up for the events he was supposed to show up for. He remarried and had a son in Cincinnati and sent Christmas cards with all 4 of them on the front. He was not cruel. He was simply someone who had gone on. What remained was Patricia and the gap and Marcus and me, and very quickly it became clear which of us was going to be asked to help close it. My mother started asking me for money when I was 16, which I understand now was the earliest moment she judged it would be received as acceptable. She did not ask Marcus. Marcus, she said, was sensitive. Marcus had his own pressures. Marcus needed room. I did not appear to need room. I appeared because I had trained myself to appear this way, to be capable of anything asked of me. Competent, calm, quietly reliable. The one you call. The one who figures it out. I want to tell you what that training looked like because it did not happen all at once. It happened in small decisions, across years, each one so minor that none of them felt like a choice at the time. When my father left and the money got tight, I stopped asking for things. Not because someone told me to, because I could see the numbers on the kitchen table when the envelopes came, and I didn't want to add to them. I made my lunches. I stopped mentioning the school trip to Columbus. I got the after-school job at 17 without being asked. Each of those decisions came from the same place. A deep, unspoken understanding that someone in this family needed to not be a problem, and it was going to be me. Patricia noticed that in me, not the way she noticed Marcus's grades or the way he charmed her friends. She noticed it the way people notice a load-bearing wall with relief and reliance and the particular comfort of never having to think about it. She did not say thank you. She built on it. The asymmetry between Marcus and me was never spoken. In families like mine, the important rules are never spoken. They are communicated through 100 small moments: who gets called first, who gets the benefit of the doubt, who is assumed to be available, who gets the word sensitive, and who gets the word capable. By the time I was 20, we each understood our positions perfectly without ever once naming them. He was the one with room. I was the one who handled things. That was the role I had accepted without anyone formally offering it, and by the time I understood what I had agreed to, 14 years had passed, and the accepting had become so habitual I had to stop and think to remember that it had ever been a choice. I started working at 17, a supermarket cashier, and I paid for my own school supplies and bus pass, and whatever else I could quietly absorb so that Patricia wouldn't have to ask. The absorbing was easier than the asking. When she asked, there was a scene, not cruel exactly, but laden with the particular emotional weather that follows when Patricia needs something and has to make her need legible to another person. The tears, the history, the weight of everything she had sacrificed and endured. I learned to preempt the scene by simply providing the thing before she had to perform for it. That was the first way I enabled it. I want to name that clearly because the story is not only about what she did. It is also about what I did, for years, because I believed that managing her pain was my job, and that the cost of managing it was mine to absorb silently. I moved out at 22, into a one-bedroom in Crestwood that I paid for entirely myself. Patricia told people I had abandoned her, which she said the way you'd say someone had abandoned a child in a parking lot, with moral weight and a slight catch in the voice. She said it at family dinners, and to her friends from church, and at least twice to Marcus, who reported it to me with the uncomfortable tone of a man who does not want to take sides and has never understood that neutrality is its own choice. What Patricia did not mention to those people was that she had called me 3 times in my first month in the new apartment, each call with a request that had money in it, and I had said yes to all 3. The moving out was not the abandonment she described. It was a change of address on the same arrangement we had always had. The first account I knew about was the medical credit card. My mother had back surgery in 2009, and the surgery left a balance that her insurance didn't fully cover. The amount was $6,200. She called me. She said she needed someone to co-sign a medical credit line so she could manage the payments. She said she would handle the monthly bills. She said, and I believed her, that she would take care of it. I co-signed. I was 22 years old and I co-signed because she was my mother and she had back surgery and the alternative was watching her be unable to pay, and I was not able to do that. Not yet. She made the payments for 4 months. Then she stopped. The first notice went to her address. The second came to mine. I paid it. I absorbed it the way I had absorbed the school supplies and the bus pass, as the cost of the situation, as the price of not having a scene, as the thing that had to be done by the person who did things. I did not tell her I had paid it. I did not tell Marcus. I wrote the amount in the yellow legal pad I had started keeping, not out of any strategy, but out of the same instinct that makes me reconcile receipts at work. I wanted to know the number. I wanted it somewhere outside my head. That first entry was in January of 2010. The legal pad was spiral-bound, yellow, the cheap kind from the dollar section. I bought a new one every time I filled one. By 2023, there were 7 of them in the drawer under my printer, rubber-banded by year. The accounts multiplied the way accounts do, when there is no consequence for multiplying them. Each one arrived with a plausible reason, and a window where saying no would have required me to become a different person than I had always been in this family. The electricity account added to my name when her credit was declined and the house would have gone dark in January. The pharmacy charge line, when the insurance gap hit and the medication was non-negotiable. The second medical credit account from a different provider, which I found out about when a collection notice arrived at my address for a balance I had not known existed. That one stopped me for a moment. I called the collection company. I gave them my information to verify. They pulled up the account. They read me the account holder details. My name, my social security number, my date of birth. An account opened in 2015, 2 years after the first one. I had not opened it. I had not signed anything. I had not been in the room. She had used my information. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Outside, it was February, and the afternoon light was that specific Ohio gray that makes everything feel like a fact you can't argue with. I thought about calling her. I rehearsed the conversation in the way I had been rehearsing conversations with my mother my whole life. Anticipating every pivot, every tear, every moment where her need would become the subject of the conversation, and my right to be angry would become the aggression I had to apologize for. I did not call, I wrote the account down. Second MC line, opened without my consent. Balance $4,100. February 2017 notice date. I paid the balance. I did not know at that point how many others there were. I did not yet pull my credit report, because doing so felt like opening a door I wasn't sure I could walk back through. I kept the legal pad. I kept going to work. I kept being the person who does things. That is the part that is hardest to explain to people who haven't been in a version of it. You don't stay because you don't know. You stay because knowing is one thing, and acting on knowing is another, and between those two things is the entire weight of what you have always believed about who you are and what love requires of you. I am the one who handles things. I am the one who shows up. To stop handling, this would require me to stop being that person, and for a long time I could not figure out who I would be instead. If any part of what I'm describing is reaching you tonight, leave one word below. Just one. I will know what it means. Subscribe and stay with me, because the person who helped me figure it out didn't come from my family at all. Her name was Ellen Reyes, and she was the financial counselor at Mercy General. She was 54 years old, small, with reading glasses she pushed up into her hair and left there, and the kind of patience that doesn't feel like patience. It feels like she simply has all the time in the world for the truth to make it into the room. I met her the morning after the night in the hallway, when I came back to the hospital to handle the insurance paperwork, because of course I did. Patricia had been admitted overnight for observation. Her chest pains were cardiac-adjacent but not critical stress-related arrhythmia, the cardiologist said, manageable with medication, and monitored over a few days. She was awake and sharp, and greeted me with the particular quality of silence that Patricia deployed when she wanted me to feel that I had done something wrong by existing in the space I was in. I went to patient billing to sort out the coverage questions, and Ellen Reyes was the person behind the desk. She asked me my relationship to the patient. I said daughter. She looked at the file. She looked at me. Then she said, in the careful, neutral way of a woman who has learned to say things that need to be said, "Can I ask, are you the emergency contact on the account?" I said I was. She said, "You're also the guarantor on the outstanding balance from 2019. I said I knew about that one. She said there was also a 2021 balance, an outstanding amount of $1,840, guarantor listed as Diane Calloway, which was me. I said I did not know about that one. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, gently, "I think it might be worth sitting down for a minute." I sat down. Ellen Reyes had been a hospital financial counselor for 16 years. In 16 years, she told me, she had seen a particular pattern often enough that she had learned to name it when she saw it. She said she wasn't a lawyer and she wasn't making any accusations. She was simply pointing at what the paperwork said. She pulled up the account screen. Two balances with my name as guarantor, one I knew about and one I didn't. She asked if I'd been listed as guarantor when I co-signed. I said yes, for the 2019 one. She said the 2021 account had been opened with me listed as guarantor without a co-signature from me. She showed me the form, which had my name printed in the guarantor field but my signature line blank. A blank signature line. My name. An account I had not opened and had not signed. She said, "This is the second time in 2 years your name appeared on a guarantor line with no corresponding signature." She was very quiet when she said it. She was not performing concern. She was stating a fact that she had found unusual enough to mention. I thought about the collection notice from 2017. The account opened in my name in 2015. The first cosign in 2009. The electricity account, the pharmacy line. I said, "How would I find out how many accounts have my name on them?" Ellen slid a notepad across the desk and wrote down one website address and 2 phone numbers. She said, "Pull your full credit report. All 3 bureaus. Look at every open and closed account, every inquiry, every guarantor listing. Then call the numbers if you need help reading what you find." She said, "I'm sorry." And then she said, "You're not the first person who's sat in this chair." I folded the paper. I put it in my work bag. I went into my mother's room and I sat with her for an hour, and I did not say anything about what I had just learned, because I was not ready, and because I have spent 33 years managing the timing of difficult things, and this one needed to be managed carefully. My mother was cordial that hour. Slightly performative about her discomfort, slightly pointed in the way she asked whether Marcus had arrived yet, as though my presence was the consolation prize for his absence. She told the nurse who came in to check her vitals that her daughter was very devoted. She said it with the warmth of a woman publicly crediting a good employee. But there was one moment, about 40 minutes in, that I keep returning to. She had been talking about the arrhythmia, about how frightening it had been, the chest tightening, the drive to the ER. And she stopped mid-sentence and looked at me with a quality I had not seen in a long time, something unguarded and uncertain, the face she had before the performance. She said, "You always come. When I call, you always come." I said, "I know." She said, "I know I'm," and she stopped. I watched her. For one suspended moment, something real was right there, close enough to say. I had seen this moment in my mother before, the way a door will almost open and then hold just short of the latch. She knew. On some level, whether she could name it or not, she knew what she had been asking of me and what it had cost and what it meant that I was sitting in this chair while Marcus had not yet arrived. Then the nurse came back in to adjust something on the monitor, and the moment passed, and Patricia's face went back to its default arrangement. She said, "You're a good daughter. Not I'm sorry, not thank you, not anything that would have required her to give something back. Just, you're a good daughter." The sentence of a woman who has decided that acknowledging the role is equivalent to acknowledging the cost of it. I said, "I'll come back tomorrow." I did not come back tomorrow. Very devoted, don't call her. She's nobody to me, same mouth, same day, different audience. I drove home through the November dark, and I sat at my kitchen table, and I pulled my credit report. The number was $47,000, spread across 9 accounts, 4 that I had known about in whole or in part, 5 that I had not. The oldest dated back 14 years to 2009. The most recent had been opened 8 months before the hospital admission, a retail credit line in my name with a $3,200 balance, 2 payments behind. I had never been to that store. I had never applied for that line. I didn't recognize the address on file, which was listed as my mother's house on Fenwick Street. her address, my name, my social security number. My credit score had dropped 180 points over the span of those 14 years, not all at once. That would have alerted me, but in small, incremental steps, the way a building settles without announcing that it is settling. I had noticed my credit was lower than I expected when I looked, occasionally. I had attributed it to my own debt usage, my own management choices. I had not, until that night, looked at the full picture. The full picture was 9 accounts, $47,000, $14 years, and a mother who had told a nurse I was nobody to her, while every bill she couldn't pay had my name on it. I sat at my kitchen table with the credit report printed across 11 pages, and I went through each line the way I go through insurance reconciliations at work, methodically, without emotion, looking for what the numbers say and not what I want them to say. I have done that kind of work for 9 years. It is the kind of work where personal feelings are not useful, and I had gotten very good at setting them aside. What the numbers said was plain. Account by account, date by date, the pattern was identical. An account opened in my name. Initial payments sometimes, then silence. Then the balance remaining aging. 4 of them had been charged off. 2 were in collections. 3 were current because I had been paying them, thinking they were mine. 3 accounts I had been paying without knowing why I owed them. I put the pages down. Outside, it was late November in Ohio, which means it was dark at 5 and had been dark for hours, and the streetlight through the kitchen window made a yellow rectangle on the linoleum. I looked at that rectangle for a while. I was not angry yet. I want to be accurate about that. The anger came later, and when it came, it was quieter and more useful than I expected. What I felt in that moment was something closer to recognition. The slow, heavy settling of seeing clearly what had been half visible for years. Like looking at one of those pictures where a hidden image suddenly clicks into place, and you can't unsee it, and you wonder how you missed it for so long. I had missed it because I loved her. That is the only answer I have, and I believe it is sufficient. I opened the yellow legal pad. I wrote it all down. Every account number, every balance, every date of origination. It took me 2 hours and a pot of coffee and the particular focused stillness that comes over me when I am doing something that matters, and I know it matters, and I need to do it without falling apart. I did not fall apart. I am someone who keeps records. The time for falling apart, if it came, would come after the records were complete. I wrote at the bottom of the last page, in the margin the way I used to write things I needed to remember, 9 accounts. $47,213. $14 years. None of them mine. Then I looked at the stack of 7 legal pads in the drawer and I understood, finally, completely, why I had kept them. Not because I knew this day was coming, but because something in me, quiet and unacknowledged for 14 years, had known that numbers written down are numbers that can be shown to other people. That a record is a fact. That a fact does not require anyone to believe you in order to be true. My grandfather had told me once, when I was 12 and complaining that no one believed me about something small, I can't remember what now, some childhood thing, he said. Write it down and keep it. Feelings get argued with, paper doesn't. He had been a bookkeeper. He had kept records for 40 years. He died when I was 19 and he left me a box of old ledgers, which I still have in the closet of my new house. I did not understand, when I started keeping the yellow legal pads, that I was doing what he would have done. I understand it now. I stayed at the kitchen table until midnight. I made a second pot of coffee and I did not drink it. I thought about calling Marcus and decided against it because the thing I was feeling needed to settle before it became words, and Marcus was not prepared to receive it yet. I thought about calling a friend. I thought about going to bed. I did none of these things. I sat with the legal pad and the printed report and the November dark, and I let myself know what I knew. Then I went to bed and I slept, which surprised me. But there is something about finally having all the numbers that is its own kind of peace. I did not go back to the hospital the next day. I called Ellen Reyes instead. I want to tell you about Ellen properly, because she deserves more than a footnote. She was the financial counselor. She sat behind a billing desk in a hospital, and her job was to explain insurance coverage and payment plans, and what happens to balances when insurance runs short. That was the official version of her job. The unofficial version, the one she had clearly been doing for 16 years alongside the official one, was to notice when something was wrong with a person's situation and say so out loud, carefully, in a way that left room for the person to decide what to do with the information. She had done that for me in that first meeting. She had looked at a file and looked at my face and said, "I think it might be worth sitting down for a minute." She had not made assumptions. She had not performed concern. She had stated what the paperwork showed and let me receive it. That is rarer than it sounds. People in helping professions develop a habit, sometimes, of processing other people's crises with a kind of practiced efficiency that leaves the person feeling handled rather than seen. Ellen did not do that. She was simply present. She was simply honest. She treated the facts as facts and treated me as someone capable of handling them. I called her from my car in the parking lot of my office because I had not been able to go inside yet. I told her I had pulled the full credit report. I told her the number. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry. That's a hard thing to see written down." I said I need an attorney who handles financial exploitation cases. She gave me a name. She also said something else before we hung up. She said, "You did the right thing by pulling it. A lot of people don't. They decide the not knowing is easier." She paused. "It isn't easier. It just feels like it is." I thought about that for a long time. I asked her if she would be willing to talk again if I had questions as this process developed. She said yes without hesitating. She said, "You can call me. That's what I'm here for." She meant the hospital billing office. But it felt like more than that, and I chose to receive it as more than that, because at that point I needed someone to say, "You can call me," and mean it. I asked her if she could recommend an attorney who handled financial exploitation cases. I said the word exploitation carefully, the way you say a new word out loud for the first time, testing whether it fits the weight of the thing you're describing. She said it did fit, and she gave me a name. Her name was Margaret Chu, and she worked out of a small practice on the west side of Crestwood, 2 rooms above a tax preparation office, framed diplomas on the wall, and a desk that was almost entirely buried under organized stacks. She was 48 precise, with the manner of a person who has spent her career translating complicated situations into language that holds up in court. I brought the legal pads. All 7 of them. I also brought the printed credit report, the original cosign documents I had kept in my file at home. I keep everything. I have kept everything since I was 22. This is the habit of a woman who works in accounts receivable and has learned that paper is protection, and a folder of collection notices going back to 2011. Margaret Chu looked at the legal pads for a long time. Not quickly. The way you look at something that took effort and deserves to be recognized. She said, "You kept records." I said I had. She said, "These are going to matter." She explained what she was looking at. Several of the accounts constituted unauthorized use of my identifying information, my social security number, my date of birth, my address, to open credit lines without my knowledge or consent. That was identity theft, legally, regardless of the family relationship. The guarantor listings without a corresponding signature were a separate issue, potentially fraud on the credit applications. The total exposure, the $47,213, was not a number a court would treat as immaterial. She was not dramatic about it. She stated it the way she would state a column of numbers that added up to a specific total. She said, "The question is what outcome you want." I thought about that. I had been thinking about it in the 2 weeks since I had been avoiding my mother's calls, the pattern of avoidance I had never allowed myself in 33 years of being the person who answers. Letting the phone ring felt like something new and strange, like a word in a language I was just beginning to learn. I said I want the accounts removed from my credit. I want the debt attributed to the person who incurred it. I want my name on the things I actually signed and off the things I didn't. Margaret Chu nodded. I said, "And I want her to know that I know all of it." She looked at me. I said, "Not as a threat. I'm not doing this to punish her. But I'm not going to pretend I don't know what happened. I'm done managing what she knows and doesn't know." Margaret Chu wrote something in her notebook. Then she said, "That's the clearest statement of intent I've heard in a long time. Let's build that." The legal process moved the way legal processes do, which is to say carefully and not quickly. Margaret filed disputes with all three credit bureaus on the unauthorized accounts. She filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. She sent a letter to my mother, through certified mail, that detailed the accounts in question and requested a response. My mother called me twice after the certified letter arrived. I did not answer. She called Marcus, who called me. His voice had the uncomfortable quality of a man who has been asked to mediate a situation he has always preferred not to see. He said, "Diane, she's really upset." I said, "I know, Marcus." He said, "She says you're trying to destroy her." I said, "I'm trying to remove my name from accounts she opened without my consent." There was a silence. Marcus is a man who is good at silence when the alternative is saying something that requires him to take a position. He said, "She says the money stuff was always," he paused, "understood between you." I said, "Understood between us means she understood it and I didn't fully." He said, "Is there anything I can do?" I said, "Yes. When this is resolved, you might think about what it means that she never asked you for any of it. That answer might tell you something." He was quiet again. Then he said, "I didn't know the extent of it." I said, "I know you didn't. I didn't either for a long time." We hung up without any resolution, which is different than hanging up badly. We hung up like two people who had said something true and were each going to need time with it. Marcus called me again 6 weeks later. That call was different. I'll tell you about it in a moment. Here is where the story turns, and where it turned I was not expecting. My mother was discharged from Mercy General after 4 days. She was stable. She had my brother's phone number as her contact, and she had a prescription and a follow-up appointment, and she had, according to the discharge nurse, asked 3 times whether I was coming. I was not coming. I was at work, processing insurance claims, doing the job I had done for 9 years with the steady focus of a woman who has learned to be very good at the work directly in front of her. 2 weeks after the certified letter, my mother called Margaret Chu's office. Not to respond to the claims, to ask whether there was anything she could do to keep this quiet. Margaret told me about the call. She was careful about what she relayed. She said my mother had asked whether this had to go on a record anywhere. She said my mother had been concerned about what people would think. I sat with that for a moment. She had told a nurse I was nobody. She had put my name on 9 accounts without my full consent. And when the paper caught up to her, the thing she was worried about was what people would think. I was not angry when Margaret told me. I was something quieter and more settled than anger. I was finished. Finished not in the way of slamming a door, but in the way of a person who has walked a very long way and arrived at a destination and can sit down. I wrote one more entry in the yellow legal pad. At the top of a fresh page, in the same plain handwriting I had used for 14 years of numbers and dates. November. Everything on the table now. No more management. The setback came in December, 2 weeks before the credit disputes were resolved. I had been in conversation with a mortgage lender about a small house near work, the first time in my adult life that I had felt financially stable enough to try. The lender ran a hard pull and called me the following afternoon. Her voice was professional and flat in the way that people make their voices when the news is not good. She said my current credit score was 591. The loan required 620 minimum. She said there were too many derogatory marks across multiple accounts to approve at the present time. I said I understood. I said there were disputes in progress that would likely change the picture significantly. She said to call back when those resolved. I hung up. I sat at my desk in my small apartment, the apartment I had lived in for 11 years, without saving adequately for a down payment, because a not insignificant portion of what I earned had gone to balances on accounts I hadn't opened, and I looked at the wall for a few minutes. Then I called Ellen Reyes, not because she was legally involved. Because she had been the first person to say out loud what she saw when she looked at my situation, and I had learned in the weeks since that kind of seeing is rarer than it should be. Ellen answered. I told her about the mortgage. She listened. Then she said something I wrote down verbatim in the legal pad that evening. She said, "You've been paying for someone else's choices for 14 years. That means you've had less room than you should have. When the room opens up, You'll be able to move faster than you expect. People who have been constrained always do. I wrote it down, I still have it on that page. She was right. I didn't know yet how right she was, but she was. The credit bureau disputes came back in January. 5 accounts removed entirely, unauthorized origination, insufficient signature documentation, identity verification failures. The 3 accounts I had co-signed remained, because I had in fact co-signed them, but Margaret had negotiated settlements on 2 of those at reduced amounts based on the documented pattern of coercion and the absence of full disclosure at the time of signing. My credit score, when the dust settled at the end of January, was 668. 77 points higher than it had been in the fall. Still building. I called the mortgage lender back in March. I was approved in April for a small house on the east side of Crestwood, 3 rooms, a porch that faced west toward the afternoon light, a kitchen I intended to use. The day I signed the closing documents, Margaret Chu handed me a folder with copies of every dispute resolution, every account removal letter, every correspondence. The folder was 3 inches thick. I held it in both hands at the closing table and I felt the weight of it. Margaret said, "Congratulations." I said, "Thank you." She said, "You should know that the documentation you brought me, those legal pads, made the difference. A dispute without records is an argument. A dispute with that level of documentation is a fact. My grandfather had been right. Paper doesn't get argued with. My mother and I are not estranged, but we are different than we were. I want to be honest about what that looks like because the internet has a tendency to want estrangement or reconciliation, and what I have is neither." She called me in February, 3 weeks after the credit resolutions. Her voice was not warm, and it was not cold. It was the voice of a woman who has been cornered by something she can't manage away and is deciding how to proceed. She said, "Margaret Chu's office says everything has been resolved." I said yes. She said, "I want you to know I never intended for it to go this far." I have thought about that sentence often since she said it. I never intended for it to go this far. Not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," not "I knew what I was doing and I did it anyway." Just a line about how far things had gone as though distance were the problem. I said, "I know." She said, "Are we?" and she paused, the way Patricia pauses when she wants you to fill in the rest. I said, "Mom, I'm not done being your daughter. But I'm done being the one who absorbs things. If you need something from me, you ask me clearly and I'll give you an honest answer. We don't have accounts. We don't have arrangements. We have conversations." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I had not expected. Her voice was different when she said it, not the performance voice, not the church voice, not the voice she used for nurses and neighbors. Something smaller. She said, "You always handled things so well. I think I relied on that more than I should have." That was the closest she has ever come to naming it. I did not forgive her in that moment, the way it happens in movies, fully and with music. What I did was receive what she had said and put it in a specific drawer in my mind where I keep things that are real but incomplete. It is real. It is not enough. Both of those things are true, and I am learning to let them both be true at the same time. We talk on the phone now, once a week. The calls are shorter than they used to be and more honest. She doesn't ask for things the old way. I don't absorb things the old way. We are learning a different language slowly, and I cannot tell you how it ends because it hasn't ended. It is a work in progress, and so am I. Marcus came to see me in March, 2 weeks before the closing. He drove from Columbus on a Saturday and we sat on my apartment porch with coffee in the cold, and he asked me to explain, in full, what had happened over the years. I brought a legal pad. Not for drama. Because the numbers were the clearest way to explain it. I walked him through it. He listened without interrupting, which is not something Marcus has always been capable of. At the end, he was quiet for a long time. He looked at his coffee. He looked at the parking lot. He said, "She never asked me for any of it." I said, "I know." He said, "She didn't ask me because she knew I'd say no." I said, "Probably." He said, "She asked you because she knew you'd say yes." I said, "Yes." He looked at me with something I did not have a clean name for. Grief in it and guilt, and something like respect that had arrived too late to be a comfort but was real anyway. He said, "That's not fair to you." I said no. He said I should have, and he stopped. I said, Marcus, I'm not asking you to go back and be different. I'm asking you to be different from here. He nodded. He has been mostly since then. He calls now without the specific purpose of passing along messages. He asks about things. He listens when I tell him. We are building something that resembles what siblings should have built years ago, slowly and without a blueprint. Ellen Reyes came to the house closing. I had asked her. She is not someone who would have expected to be asked, which is exactly why I asked her. She sat in the back row of the closing office with her reading glasses pushed up in her hair and her hands folded in her lap, and when the title officer passed me the final page to sign, Ellen caught my eye and gave me the small nod of a woman who knows what a stack of papers can mean. I brought her a plant for her desk afterward. A small succulent, the kind that requires very little and quietly persists anyway. She put it on the corner of her desk and said she would think of me when she looked at it. I told her she deserved to think of herself. She said, "How does it feel?" The closing, I thought about it. I said, "It feels like my name finally means something good on a document." She laughed, the quiet kind, the kind that understands exactly what a sentence means without needing it explained. She said, "That's it. That's the whole thing right there." She still works in the billing office at Mercy General. She still sits behind that desk and says, "I think it might be worth sitting down for a minute to whoever comes in and needs to hear it." She has no idea, probably, how many lives have been changed by that one sentence from a woman who had the patience to look at a file, and then look at a face and decide to say what she saw. I think about that. I think about what it means to be the person who says the quiet, necessary thing in an ordinary moment, without knowing it is necessary, without an audience, just because it is true and someone in front of you needs to hear it. That is the kind of person I want to be. Not the one who handles things invisibly and absorbs costs and maintains the system. The one who sees clearly and says so. The yellow legal pads are in a box now, in my office at the new house. I kept them. Not as evidence, the legal process is over, but because they are 14 years of the thing I did right without knowing I was doing it right. I was keeping records because it was my instinct to keep records. I was tracking numbers because that is the kind of person I am. I did not know I was building a case. I was just being myself, and being myself turned out to be the thing that mattered most. Here is what I believe now, sitting in a house that belongs to me, with a credit score that is mine and a file cabinet that holds documents I actually signed. I spent 14 years being the person who handles things. I was asked to handle things because I was capable and because no one asked the person who wasn't. That asymmetry is real and it cost me, and I will not pretend otherwise. But there is a different way of looking at it too. In handling things, I built the habits that eventually protected me. The legal pads, the receipts, the file folders, the instinct to write down what happened and when. I had all of that not because I was planning for a fight, but because it was simply who I was, the kind of person who believes that a thing worth doing is worth documenting. When the moment came, I had everything I needed. Not because someone gave it to me. Because I had been building it for 14 years, quietly, without an audience, doing what needed to be done. That is its own kind of inheritance. Family is not the people who put your name on things without your permission. It is the people who see clearly what the paper says and tell you about it anyway. Ellen Reyes is not my family by blood. She sat across a desk for 40 minutes and changed the direction of my life. Marcus is my family, and it took him 33 years and a Saturday in the cold to sit down and finally listen. My mother is my family, and I love her in the complicated, carefully boundaried way of someone who has been hurt by a person they cannot stop loving, and has decided that love and accountability can occupy the same space, imperfectly, for now. What I know about family now is different from what I was taught. I was taught that family is the people you were assigned to. That love means absorbing. That being capable means being available without limit. I absorbed those lessons the way I absorbed the bills, without question, because questioning them would have required me to become a different person than the one I had always been. I am becoming a different person anyway. Slowly, in the specific way that change happens when it is real and not performed, through small decisions, accumulated across months, each one a little clearer than the one before. I ask for what I need now. I say no to what I cannot give. I let the phone ring when the call would cost me something I don't have to spare. These are not dramatic changes. From the outside, they probably look like nothing. But from the inside, they feel like the difference between a life that belongs to you and a life that belongs to whoever needs you most on any given Tuesday. I choose the first one now. I am still learning how. I sit on my west-facing porch in the evenings when the light is good. I drink coffee. I keep a small notebook on the side table, not for bills. The bills are mine and I handle them and they are manageable, all of them mine, every one correctly attributed but for other things. Thoughts. Plans. The occasional thing I notice about the day that I want to keep. The small daily record of a life that is now, for the first time, correctly attributed to its owner. Some evenings I bring the box of my grandfather's old ledgers out and set one on my knee. I don't read them. I just hold them. 40 years of careful bookkeeping, every number in its right place, every column balanced. He did that work for 40 years and it held up. Mine held up too. Nobody else's name on it, just mine. That's my story. A nurse who wrote something down because it felt wrong. A legal pad that held 14 years. And a woman who finally stopped absorbing what wasn't hers to carry. If someone in your life sees clearly and tells you so, hold on to that person. They are rarer than they should be. And if you've been carrying something that has another person's name on it, know that paper can be corrected. It's not too late to sort out whose name belongs where. Leave a comment. Share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.